Thanks.
So we have time for a nice conversation, and I'm going to begin by asking a few questions, but we'd love to involve you, the audience. We have a microphone somewhere on the left here and on the right. If you want to ask a question, please step up to the microphone. Asif, thank you very much for your film. You seem to be really attracted to these troubled souls in your films. Is it something inherent in you as a person?
In my family?
In your family, in you as a person, or just as a filmmaker?
I don't know. These are the people I'm interested in. These are the kind of films that I go and see. These are the books that I read, I suppose. I don't know, if everyone's lovely and great, what's the point? You know, I suppose I'm interested in understanding why people become the people that I see, or what happened along the way. And I've always been fascinated by, I suppose, the kind of characters cut slightly on the edge, the darker ones.
And this, I guess, after Amy and Senna, obviously Amy, a film that I think many people out there will have seen. This is a unique film in that it's a film about a person who's still around, although it's perhaps more distant slice of history, late 80s, early 90s. Did that affect your kind of sensitivity to the material, but also your relationship with your subject?
I mean, it was a part of the reason for doing the film, was having done 2 films about brilliant young people who died young, tragically young. I thought if I do another film like this, it has to be different, and it has to have a kind of different way of, the ending has to be different, I guess. And Diego Maradona is one of those characters specifically, you know, he's never gonna quietly retire and kind of get a pub somewhere in Ireland, you know, he's gonna do something chaotic constantly, always be kind of like switching and going to a new country. And so that was a challenge that we had to take on. We had to try and figure out, how does this end? You know, he gets old. That's a different type of story to people who die tragically young. He, some way or another, maybe has to deal with some of the mistakes that he's made, or not, or kind of look back at his life and understand the pain that he may have caused. That process, I think, is still going on, and it was kind of happening during the editing. The scene where he recognizes his son happened while we were making the film. You know, so when we started the film, he still hadn't done that. He was still denying that the boy was his kid. And it happened during the editing. So it was an interesting kind of idea to kind of look back at a moment, something that happened in Naples, and it took him, you know, so long, 30 years, to actually recognize the fact that that was his son. So that was a challenge, which I was interested in. It means he's a huge story. You know, he's 59 years old, he's still going, and the challenge was, how do you kind of create the essence of that story and put it into a couple of hours?
And what convinced you to get involved in this one? Was it the kind of archive material that you'd seen and got access to?
I think this one kind of started early. I am a football fan, so I knew more, I guess, about him when he was playing. I guess I knew about the World Cups. I didn't really know what went on in between, because it wasn't on TV when I was younger. And I'd read a particular book about him in the late 80s when I was a student. I remember thinking, what an incredible life. So it actually predates making feature films, talk about making Senna and Amy. But it kept kind of coming and going away. And it was after making the Amy film that it felt the right time to try to do it. Like I said, for the answers I gave earlier, because it was a third film, but different in a way, because of the complexity of him, but also the fact that he's still going. Mm. The archive and all that came later. You know, it's only once you sort of agree to make a film do you actually get a chance to see what exists. And we had a brilliant team of archive researchers and producers, one of which, Lena, is here. She's here, who until they start digging and looking, I don't know what's there. You just kind of hope and assume that with his life and the way he lived, that there'd be a lot out there.
And what does that research look like? Is it kind of knocking on doors in Argentina and Napoli, or?
Yeah, this film was tricky. The language is a big thing. I don't speak Spanish, particularly not Argentinian Spanish. I don't speak Italian and Neapolitan. And so for me, we're editing in London, in Clerkenwell. The story takes place in Naples. Diego Maradona lives in Dubai at the time. And all of the key kind of contributors and the key voices and people who really knew Diego were all in Buenos Aires. So, this is not a big budget film. It may be big budget for certain docs, but it definitely wasn't bigger than Amy. Amy won an Oscar. It felt like we had less money to make this film. And there was a lot more traveling involved. And it just meant that if I wanted to meet with Maradona, I couldn't do it every other week when I wanted to. I'd have to wait a year to meet him again. So we'd almost have to make the film a bit like Senna and Amy, where we don't have the lead character. We just have to cut the film, put it together, know very clearly what we want, then go to Dubai to interview Diego Maradona, go to Naples, see what's out there, see who are the key people who pop up in the footage or who are mentioned in the interviews that we do. I think in total there are about 70 or 80 interviews done for this film. Sometimes a few people I interviewed more than once, of which maybe there are 15 or 16 voices that end up in the finished movie. But all of the kind of research comes together with trying to figure out, well, who might have material, who are key people. You've got to talk to Claudia, his ex-wife. When we were making the film, Claudia and Diego are not getting along. They're suing each other right now, and have been for a while. They've had a big fallout. And I'm like, we can't make this film without you. You have to be in this film. That process took a really long time to get Claudia on board. Once we got her on board, we'd heard a rumor that there was a lot of archive in the back room, and there was a trunk that was full of pneumatic tapes that had not been touched for 30 years. So a lot of the footage in the film we found outside of Naples and in Buenos Aires.
And I guess the most important voice in the film is Maradona himself. And I read somewhere that you said he's perhaps not the best witness to his own life, or the voice that should be.
In my opinion, maybe not his, but
yeah. How did you kind of navigate that sense of perhaps distrust or disbelief about how he described his own experience?
I mean, it's just. I guess we all do it. We create a story. Someone interviews you, and if you're as famous as him, he gets asked about things again and again, and more time passes, you become a storyteller and you create a version of events. And then the way we work, because of the nature of the fact that it's so reliant on archive and what you're looking at, we do a hell of a lot of research, quite forensic work and research of putting it all together, getting everything that exists, and then finding who was there and talking to everyone. And then if they're all saying a certain thing, and then the key character that you meet and you interview says something which is almost the opposite, then you're in an interesting kind of dilemma where you're like, well, do I correct you? It's your life, but I'm not sure that's what I think happened. So, we have a kind of basic concept, this idea of Diego and Maradona. That came out in a few interviews. It came out primarily from Fernando Signorini, his trainer. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I heard it, I thought this could be interesting because I didn't really know how the film was going to come together yet. There wasn't an obvious rival, like with Senna, he had Alain Prost, or with Amy, there was like family or entourage or relationships or her relationship with fame. With Diego Maradona, there was always this idea of, so what's the thing that's kind of bugging him? What is he angry about? Who is he fighting with? And it's kind of everyone, and himself, primarily. So when Fernando Signorini mentioned that idea of Diego and Maradona, there was a little moment of thinking, that's interesting, that's also different, I guess, to the other films. It's a more internal concept, an internal idea. But when I did bring it up with Diego, he's like, don't be silly, there's only one of me, what are you talking about? So it's like, he may not agree at all with that idea, but everyone else sort of thought, yeah, the person that I'm meeting now, maybe at one end of the Maradona spectrum, even on a good day, but the person they all knew was that's this Diego guy who's long gone. Maybe he's not around anymore. Maybe the person I'm making the film about doesn't exist. That was, I suppose, part of the thing that I was learning as I was going along.
Yeah, and as you say, I think it is kind of a spectrum or a schizophrenia that
bipolar, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but you could meet one person one day, and he's really nice and sweet, and you're having a good time, and it's like, I like this guy. He's really charming. He's really charismatic, and you could be there another day, and you're just not going to get anywhere. You're not. This is not going to work. He's not in a mood. And actually, what happens is often his entourage will just say, today's not a good day. Try tomorrow. Now, they probably know what's going on. I don't know. You just think, you're being difficult. But actually, there may be a reason why they think it's probably not a good time to try and meet him.
What do you think the turning point was for him? There is a hint in this early press conference at Napoli that perhaps the Camorra or the Mafia are involved in the transfer. Do you think he approached that part of his career with innocence, or he was aware of...
I genuinely think he was quite innocent, actually, going into Naples. I don't think he knew where he was going. I think literally there was a situation where Barcelona was a disaster. He should have come to Sheffield, see? Barcelona's a disaster.
Sheffield Wednesday or United?
United. No, not Wednesday. Shocking. He missed the intro. Where were you? Sorry.
Well, some people might want him to get
I forgot what I was talking about now. I agree. What were we talking about?
I was asking whether, do you think in his early career he was genuinely innocent? I think there are hints within the film also when he was at Boca in the fur coat, there's definitely an ego there. There's a hint of Maradona.
Oh yeah, it's like if you're really poor and suddenly you've got money, you want to show it. You've got to have the car, you've got to have the coat, the watch, it's not something you sort of say, oh, it doesn't matter, it's hidden away. I don't have any cash, look. No, you show everyone you've got money, you've got the best fur coat, and his family moves out. I think that was all part of kind of the blingy nature of 80s, I suppose, as well. Mm-hmm. I do think because Barcelona was a disaster, the truth is, and he became known as a bit of a problem player, no one else wanted him. No one else came in for him. This team comes in, and he's like, okay, I'll go there. They'll pay. I'll go. And that's kind of the life that he's led all the way through. Who's going to pay me? I'll go there. Yeah. And, so when I met him, he was in Dubai, coaching a second division team. And now he's in Mexico, coaching a second division team. And that is kind of the life that he's always had. There's this version of this guy who's almost looking for home constantly. Mm-hmm. The theme, I suppose, that runs through the 3 films is young people who become famous, so child star thing, and how that can mess you up. Or if you're Ayrton Senna, you're very strong spiritually. He was able to deal with it in a certain way, but then the thing he couldn't do was ever quit, and that's what kind of takes him out at the ending. He can't walk away from racing. For Amy, it was this other thing kind of to do with a relationship with fame. With Maradona, he's kind of search. He needs money. He needs to be shown that he's worth something. He's worthy because he comes from nothing. And so you've got to show it off. I need money, pay me. But there's obviously a lack of self-worth down below. There's something where he doesn't feel worthy. He can't share. He can't have relationships. If people do kind of care for him and love him, he pushes them away, starts a fight. So there's a lot of that going on. I think Naples, he's quite innocent and vulnerable arriving. For me, the turning point is at the high point of his career. He wins the World Cup, wins Scudettos, but it's the denial of the boy. For me, that's the point when I look at the footage where something's changed in his eyes, the light's gone. The minute he starts to lie, for me, is the point when he's now got to cover that up, and the lie gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's when the drink and the drugs and everything come in at that point. He probably dabbled before, but that's when it becomes a problem for me.
Yeah, I guess the hedonism becomes less achievement, it's more escapism at that point for him.
It's covering up the pain.
And I didn't get a sense within the film of many peers. You get glimpses of his mother and father, but no mention really of kind of managers during his career. Do you feel like he never really had a peer within the game and within his life?
I mean, there were managers, and they came and they went, and I would say some were good and some were not so good. But I suppose the reason we didn't focus on them, because in the end, I think Signorini was a key person in his life, because in a way he was not really part of the payroll. He was slightly different. He didn't work for Maradona. He's like, I can come and go. I'm not bothered. Whereas everyone else somehow was there, and they couldn't displease him, because they'd be gone. What was interesting is I remember friends saying, so who were his friends? And that's the thing that you wonder, who were the close friends? And I don't know if he ever had any. I think he's quite a lonely character. I think he always has been. There are people that are in his life, but then what often happens is there'll be another chapter and they get pushed out and a new lot come in, and they're sort of brought in to wind up the last lot, to make them feel bad. I think that's another kind of sad recurring theme of his life, I found.
And how's the process for you of working with material? You've worked with Chris King, the editor.
Fantastic editor, yeah.
On this kind of trilogy of documentaries. And for me, I noticed moments where, clearly you've gone through the archive in incredible detail, looking for scenes where you get a slight glimpse of Maradona amongst the crowd, or it's just to pick out an expression that is really so symbolic in that moment. What's the experience like for you? Is it wading through kind of hours and hours of footage?
I mean, the way we work, Chris is so brilliant. Chris cut Exit Through the Gift Shop, and he's done various stuff before, and then he was I had 2 editors on Senna. He was the second editor. He cut Amy. We've done this together, Diego Maradona, and he's so brilliant. What I don't do is I don't sit there next to him telling him what to do. He cuts. I work on my own Avid, and I'm generally thinking ahead. And I'm looking at the other material, and I'm thinking, who do we need to interview next? What's missing? The way I've been working since Amy, which has been quite interesting, is there's never a script or an outline or a treatment or a document of any form. There's no paper. a person, and the rule is we're going to research everything about this person. We're going to speak to everyone and give us a couple of years, and then we'll figure out what the film is. And that we have to be left alone to talk to whoever we want to talk to and work how we want to work. What that means is that I can sort of change my mind and say, I think it's about this, and I'll scribble it down on a whiteboard, and then I'll rub out the whiteboard and go, no, I think it's about this now. Something that someone said, or some footage that we see, or something comes along, and the story can head off organically where I feel it needs to go. And then generally I will be working on that, and then Chris just cuts, and then he presents, and I react. And then our team go off. Chris talks to them directly, I talk to them directly, searching. In this case, in Argentina, in Spain, in France, in Italy, in Naples, Argentina and Italy are not particularly easy places that are neatly, where everything's neatly logged. A lot of the footage in Argentina, it's an old video format from the 80s. Literally, the TV companies didn't digitize anything, chucked all the tapes out. So there are people out there who would just go past the TV stations, look in the skips, take all the tapes, go, I'm a collector. Who wants something, And if there's a chance that there's a bit of Maradona on there, it's probably worth quite a lot of money. And so a lot of the footage came from private collectors. Naples is a whole other set of things. Nothing is done over the phone. Nothing is done by email. You've got to meet people face to face. You've got to have a coffee. You've got to chat to them. You've got to have a bit of a kind of bartering thing going on. And then your family, right, until you work at the money
Share
stage.
a cigar. Maybe.
So it's a very difficult, very wordy process. And I had to rely on a brilliant team because I wasn't able to speak directly to anyone. So that was a massive challenge for me and for Chris. He's cutting. You ask a question and, the answer in Spanish is going to be 27 minutes sometimes, and it's like, how do you cut that into 4 lines? So Chris was really learning Spanish grammar and Italian grammar very, very quickly. But he's brilliant.
I think I'd like to open it up to
You mentioned music as well. But Antonio Pinto is the other guy who did a score who I've worked with a lot. He's based in Sao Paulo, just to complicate matters. So he's another key part of the team in terms of the way the pictures and the sound and the music and everything comes together.
Mm-hmm. And how did that work actually with the score for the film? Were you simultaneously having pieces of music produced to cut to? So generally it really informs the pace of the film.
Definitely. Chris, obviously you want the music there. I try as much as possible never to have temp music. So from way back from when I first did my kind of almost short films and my first fiction features, I don't ever have temp score. I always find the composer and ask the composer to create the music as we're working, or sometimes before I've shot a film. So that worked on Senna and worked on Amy. And here, Antonio gave us a few themes and cues, and then some of them are in the final film that he's redone, and other times he would write another piece of music along the way. Or Chris, who's amazing with music, will find a piece of music, and we'll work with that, and then we'll sort of figure out whether or not we can clear it and use it.
Yeah. And what about the sound design? Did you have to elevate that quite a lot too?
We tried, yeah. So again, same team, my kind of sound design team and dialogue editor. One of them, Andy, I was at film school with. Years ago, we were at the Royal College of Art together. We made short films together, and we've been making features for now 20 years. And Stephen Griffiths is the other kind of brilliant kind of technician who we work with. And they do big movies, right? So I've done features with them, but they do Ridley Scott films, and they do, they do working title movies, and then when we work on a documentary, as far as I'm concerned, I want us to aim for the same level. We may not have the same budget, but we aim for that. So we work in a really great place at Twickenham where we mix. And so technically, for me, especially if you're dealing with archive and it may not look as good as, something that's shot on 8K or, Super 35 or 35mm or whatever, for me, the way to make it feel like a movie has got to sound good. You've got to do whatever you can technically, and use the best places you can, but it's really putting that work into sound design and music and elevating it. And in the case of football, when you've got a big wide shot and you just like, which one's who, you want to kind of just focus the eyes on that's Maradona, and to feel those tackles and to feel the kind of things that are going on the pitch, which is pretty brutal at the time. So that was the idea, anyway.
Yeah, it both kind of immerses you in the stadium, but also gives his singular experience of it. I'd love to invite the audience to ask questions. I think there's somebody stood here on the left.
Mike's there. Okay.
I think there's someone on the right. I'm on the right.
Go for it.
It's our left.
You're on my left.
Oh, I see. Well, we always, I don't know. I'll go over here.
No. I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I have no interest in football whatsoever, so it was a very enjoyable film because it was about people. I like that. 2 questions I would like to ask. How long time did it actually then take you to edit? I mean, how many hours did you sit by yourself, and how many hours did he sit by himself? And
2 years.
The difference between the 3 films that I've seen you have done, this one had a main character who was still alive, as you mentioned, but it seemed to have influenced it as well, because the other ones seemed to have, you could kind of decide their legacy, or their, you had a more, I don't know, a freer way of deciding what they actually, what happened, and how to, you make more, I would say, free decisions. In this film, I had the feeling I'm doing a film about people who are still alive sometimes, and I have this, it sometimes nags me, they're going to see it, maybe they will survive to see the movie when it's done. You can't.
Are we still on the first question or the second one? Yeah.
I'm still at the second question.
All right.
I'm just trying to rephrase it and say, how did it influence your process that the guy you were filming didn't die before you made the film?
God, that's not a nice way of putting it. I have to say, there was one point when I was in Naples and I was trying to explain to somebody that I'm trying to make this film about Diego Maradona, and they'd be like, right, and who are you? And I go, well, I did this film about Ayrton Senna, and he was this guy, he was a racing driver, and he died, and then I made this film about him, and they go, okay, and again, I did this film about Amy Winehouse and shit, and they were like, you're cursed. And I'm like, no, they were already dead before I made the film, because he thought every time I made a film about someone, they died. Anyway, the question of whether it's difficult because Diego Maradona, as I kind of tried to say earlier, he doesn't just stick in one place or do one thing. He just constantly keeps doing something else that people, his biographers and people who spend a lot of time with him, after I guess what we decided to do is to focus on his football career, which ended in 1991, in my opinion, and we almost say it ends with that penalty kick against Italy. He carried on playing for a few years, but I don't think he did anything kind of significance. He may have scored the odd brilliant goal, but it was the same cycle. He went somewhere, there was a lot of hope, he was brilliant, he did something great, it all goes a little bit wrong, he gets in a fight, gets in an argument, it ends in tears, he leaves, goes somewhere else, there's great hope. And that cycle kind of continued. So I guess we decided, because his story is such a huge one, to focus on what we thought was the biggest cycle, the place where he became the greatest player in the world, and the place where all of his problems kind of started and then would later manifest themselves. With regards to the ending, I guess we can only, when you're doing a story of a real person or a life, do the essence. Do your best at doing the essence of someone when you're trying to do someone's life in 2 hours. What I hoped to do, what Chris and I and the team hoped to do, was to give you enough of a hint that everything I feel that comes after, you can kind of go, oh, right, that's Maradona, or that's Diego, or, that's just him being that guy that we hopefully have showed you how he was formed. I don't know if that answers the question, but that was the intention. It was a really difficult thing to crack. And, there's a version, as with all of my films, which it was 45 minutes before he got to Naples, and that became that 5-minute mad opening drive. And there was half an hour after he left Naples, which was really great, but it was all too much. It was too long, so we had to do some tough cuts. Thank you.
And how long did it take you? That's question 1.
So the film took 3 years to make, of which there was about a year full-on just archive research, and I was off doing bits and pieces, and then really hardcore, non-stop, every single day, Chris King working 2 years.
I think we have another question behind you there.
Thank you. I thought the most interesting thing about your film was the relationship between Maradona, Diego, and the people of Naples. That seemed to me to be extraordinary. That a city that's been sort of despised and rejected and perhaps internally balkanized by all sorts of dark forces, that there's this strong electric relationship, and maybe you could say something about that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, thank you, became like the key relationship in the story is his relationship with the city and the people from the city who truly love him and who elevate him and turn him into this kind of godlike figure, and the problem is it might be possible to love him too much and to suffocate him and to not let him just go off and do his own thing, which is what he needed. So the reason why I suppose it was interesting for us was Naples is the perfect place for him because he needs to be in a place like that. He's a street guy. I don't think he was ever going to be happy or comfortable in Barcelona and dressed up in a suit and kind of like being in that kind of world. Yeah. He needs to be with people who are from a certain background. That's where he's from.
Definite parallels in the character of the city.
Absolutely. But all of the issues and all of the problems that he has to deal with later on in life all come from being in a really rough place like Naples in the 80s, which had the crime rate and the murder rate was the highest in Europe. It was one of the poorest places in Europe. Somehow they found the money to buy the most expensive player in the world.
I'm being signaled that we've got very little time left, but we've got time for one more question over here.
Yeah, it was just something I wondered when you were interviewing Maradona himself. Did he appear to express any regret, guilt, or contrition to how he'd lived his life?
Not really. No, it's a good question, unless I've missed something. There's a scene, there's a moment when Signorini says there's Diego and there's Maradona, and Maradona's kind of like never wrong. He's never made a mistake. So, I can't think of many moments when he thought, oh, God, I made that mistake there. I'll ask a question where I'm hoping he might go there, and then he'll answer about Sepp Blatter or something, and FIFA and how corrupt they are. You go, well, that's interesting. Let's just come back to that question about, what did you think? That getting him to talk about his kids that he hadn't recognized or, things like that, relationships, it wasn't easy. And asking him again and again and again. And there was this kind of moment when, and I interviewed him. The deal contractually was I had 3 interviews with Diego Maradona, 3 interviews of 3 hours. And now I'm used to, when I'm doing my other films, where I might talk to people for 5 hours, knowing that the last 10 minutes are the bit that I might use, but I'm just kind of going to talk about everything to make them forget the process and get them comfortable. And so 3 hours isn't long, and in the end, when I met him, his attention span generally was 90 minutes, funnily enough, So it'd start off, and it'd be like a bit awkward, and then we'd start talking, and it'd get maybe good, and then there was just this natural moment when his energy levels would just tail off, and he got tired, and it's over. So you think, okay, we haven't really got going, so can we come back tomorrow? And we'd come back the next day if we were lucky. And then I'd be going, as far as I'm concerned, this is still interview number 1. I hope he doesn't think this is like interview number 2 now. We had all that kind of idea of how contractual is everyone going to get. There were certain days when he was great, and he spoke about everything, and his eyes were light, and his memory was great, and he's a really good storyteller, and very charismatic, and can be really funny and sweet. And when he's smiling, you're like, this is great. But generally, it helps if you're talking about his family, his mum and his dad, good times or coming through. And essentially, that stuff he's cool with. It's not something that he's that much of a hurry to go deeply and look back at any mistakes that he's made. And in a way, I wouldn't expect him to be like that. What I did hope to do, and I still have 1 interview left, was hoping at some point to have a film, and then because I interviewed him in Dubai. He was living in Dubai at the time. He was living on a giant palm tree, man-made palm tree in the sea, second fond on the left. And we would go there and we'd sit, and he'd be on his sofa watching Boca Juniors on TV. When he'd pop out to the loo, we'd mute the music, mute the sound, and carry on. And I kept thinking, okay, this is good. He's in a safe sort of place. He's comfortable. There's not really entourage around. There's no one there. And it was good. So the plan was always to go there and show him the film. And when he saw the film, I'd hopefully get to that place where I'd remind him of some of the things that had happened in his life, and he'd see it, because he hasn't seen his footage himself. And then maybe get that final interview where he can say, can you sum this all up? And of course, classic Diego Maradona, that interview and that meeting never happened. Whenever I tried to show him the film, we were ready to go back to Dubai, and I was told he's not going to be in Dubai, he's moving to Belarus. Okay, where's Belarus? It's closer than Dubai. We'll meet you in Belarus. And he was like, no, he won't be in Belarus, actually. He's going to Colombia. So I can't go to Colombia right now. And then he said, well, I'll be in Moscow for the World Cup. Come to the World Cup. And we're like, I don't think this is a good time to show you this particular film during the World Cup, as we saw. So then it was like, when are you going to be somewhere quiet? And he's like, I'll be in Argentina. I'm going to go on holiday in Argentina afterwards. Great. We were ready to go to Argentina. 2 days before we go to Argentina, I get a phone call from a friend who says he's taken a job in Mexico, in Sinaloa, and he's managing a club there, and he's not come back since, so he hasn't seen it. And then the crazy idea, that stupid idea that I had was, maybe he'll come to the premiere in Cannes, and if we get into Cannes. And we got into Cannes, and he didn't come. So he hasn't seen it, and I haven't got round to anyway. Life.
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for tonight, but Asif will be around tomorrow offering a masterclass at the Crucible Studio, so please do join us for that. Please put your hands together. Thank you very much for coming to Sheffield.